Welcome back to my channel for a short Sony episode, and this episode is about, first of all, my beloved Sony A7R V, but most importantly, and that's the core of the topic, about a G-Master lens here, which is perfect for portraits. And we are talking here about the FE 135mm G-Master lens, widest open f1.8. I was just shooting with that lens, I like it a lot, and that's why I wanted to share my shooting experience, provide some specifications of the lens, and of course showing you lots of sample images. Let's go right into the video. In the Sony lens lineup, the G-Master lenses, always marked with the G here on the lens body, they are the best of the best. And of course you also find the letters GM here on the notation of the lens on the lens body. And they provide absolutely terrific image quality if shot on Sony camera bodies, in particular on the Sony Alpha 1 or the Sony A7R V, but in general on all Sony Alpha cameras with a full frame sensor, and you can even shoot them on APS-C sensors, but then you have certain crop factor kicking in. The classical application of a lens with a focal length of 135mm are portraits, of course, but you can use these type of lenses also for landscape, and you get a nice telecompression effect in the image then, and for all other kinds of applications. And I personally like the image quality a lot coming from that lens, as you will see later in the sample images. Let's first look at the body of the lens. This body here is fully weather sealed, so you can shoot this under nasty weather conditions. It has an aperture ring here, have a look. Also with clicks, but you can also deactivate the clicks if you want. So here is a switch, and that switch is currently on, so you hear the clicks. But if you switch it off, it becomes absolutely silent. Listen here. Well, you will not hear anything because it's silent, as I said. Let's go back to clicks. And of course that switch is useful for video shooters who don't want to have these aperture clicks if they play with aperture in a video shooting. Then you have other elements on the list. You have here customizable function buttons on the left hand side, at the top side here. And you also have here a switch for switching or toggling between autofocus and manual focus, simply like that. So you don't have to change that in the camera body. The camera will recognize it. If you are in manual focus, the camera will know that. If you're in autofocus, the camera will also know that. And then you have here a range delimiter. So full range, which can slow down autofocus a bit, but autofocus on this camera body and lens is super fast. You can also say you want to only look for autofocus between 0.7 and 2 meter or 1.5 meter at infinity. And that is the usual setup you have on this expensive G-Master lenses. Now, when I shot with that camera over the last weekend, actually autofocus was spot on. Always sitting. Absolutely amazing how the Sony A7R V tracks subjects, moving subjects in the scene, and how this lens is playing together and harmonized in a very nice way with the autofocus system of the camera. What I want to do now is providing some specifications of the lens so you get all the data points. Want to quickly show you how autofocus is working towards my model Jennifer here in the background, and then most importantly going through sample images so you see the quality that this lens delivers in combination with the terrific 60 megapixel sensor of the Sony A7R V. If you want to purchase that 135mm G-Master lens, it sets you back by about $2,100. I just looked this up at B&H in the US. The lens is calculated for full frame sensors, but can also be shot on APS-C sensors, of course. And the optical construction of the lens is quite complex. So Sony built in here certain XA and Super ED elements, and all in we have 13 lenses in 10 groups here. 135mm is of course a telefocal length, and that means the angle of view is also quite narrow at 18 degrees. And I mentioned already we have a maximum aperture or widest open aperture, that's how I like to call it, of f1.8, and you can stop this down all the way to f22. And here you are in automatic aperture selection steered by the camera. So that is all familiar if you have shot G-Master lenses before. We have for the bokeh 11 aperture blades, and that is something we've seen on various new Leica lenses in the last months, because 11 aperture blades seem to actually establish the new standard when it comes to this topic. We have here a minimum focusing distance of 0.7 meter. That's why I also placed Jennifer a bit aside here. And you have a maximum magnification of 0.25, which is quite nice. So this lens, I will get Jennifer closer at the moment, also works for close-up type shootings going into the macro area. The filter diameter here is 82 millimeter, and that means filters are a bit more expensive than what you have on smaller lenses. And all in, you get, of course, the lens hood delivered in here. You get a nice pouch for carrying that lens if you're on travel. And you have a weight all in of the lens standalone, not counting the camera body, of 950 grams. Let's see, if I point my camera towards Jennifer here, you see it finds immediately the face. And if I now half press the shutter button, it will jump immediately to the eye. Have a look. Boom, this is so spot on. I hardly wasted any images based on my moving subjects, and autofocus performance on this camera lens combo was just absolutely convincing. All right, let's look into sample images. Here we have some images of Stephanie, and here's some images of Sabrina. Both are photo models I work with from time to time. Let's start with this one here, because that's a nice one. And this was shot widest open at f1.8, and you see how beautiful and how soft the background bokeh is here. Let's crop in by 100%. This is brilliant, right? You see here the right-hand side eye here is already blurry, because we have such a shallow depth of field, but the left-hand side eye, the focus really is nailed on the eye. It's absolutely brilliant, super sharp. You see all the details here. I think this looks really good. Let's try to find an example where hair is in the way, like this one here. And here you see the wind was blowing on that day. Again, a super remarkable background bokeh here. This is really three-dimensional. And if I go here to the eye where the focus was sitting, you see the hair is blurry, and in the background you see here on the eyelashes, super sharp, pinpoint sharp. So if hair gets into the way, the eye recognition of the Sony A7R V is not irritated. It will nevertheless nail the focus where you want it to sit, namely on the eye. So this is a really good image, looks really, really good. The two images I showed before, they are half body shots. Here I went closer to the model for a head and face shot. And if I crop in here by 100%, you see that depth of field is even more shallow than on the images before, because I have a smaller distance to my model here. And what you see here is the right hand side eye. You see this here in the iris, absolutely sharp, pinpoint sharp. The left hand side eye, already a bit blurry, based on the very shallow depth of field. And that is an interesting image. It shows again how much detail you can actually squeeze out of this camera lens combo here we are shooting with. Here another head and face shot, and you see again the wind blowing through Stephanie's hair. And again, have a look at this beautiful background bokeh. Stephanie is really separated from the background based on 135mm and a widest open aperture of f1.8. This lens is made to be shot widest open. If you don't shoot it wide open, you should probably not spend the money. And if I crop in here by 100%, you see again an incredible amount of detail here on the eyebrows, the eyelashes. You see her iris here in the eye. She has beautiful ice color, a little bit greenish, and that sets her face perfectly in scene. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, of course you can use telelenses for, let's call it, compressed landscape photography. Here I was giving Stephanie a rest and just pointing over to a church in Zurich. And the reason why I want to show this is again to show you the sharpness and the detail you get here. Look at that. This looks really good, and there's a lot going on around that church, and the camera catches all of these moments and the whole scene. Quite nice. Earlier in the video I showed a short video sequence where Stephanie was walking and I was shooting in continuous autofocus and burst rate. And the autofocus field was jumping up and down and left hand side and right hand side, and I don't think people really believe me that these images are all sharp. But I have selected here a sequence like this and want to show you how the autofocus was always nailing the eye in the way I wanted it. So here's the first image of that sequence. Let's crop in by 100%. I would call this sharp. Let's go to the next image, very sharp. Next image, sharp. And so on and so on. Have a look here. Stephanie is approaching me. the images all look really good. And look at that here. Absolutely brilliant how the autofocus is catching up with Stephanie's face while she's coming closer and walking towards me. These images all look really good. I don't think I have to go into the shooting sequence with Sabrina here, because we will find the same story. Beautiful background softness and beautiful bokeh. Very sharp when the eye is found by the autofocus. The autofocus field gets sticky on the eye when my model is moving. It's a three-dimensional tracking algorithm which we see here, and all in, this camera lens combo is not only promising but delivering from all angles. Alright, that's everything I wanted to show and demonstrate. I hope you liked that presentation, and I can fully recommend the 135mm G-Master lens for portraits, people, fashion, but also for other applications like landscape. You will love this lens on the Sony A7R V, but also on the Sony Alpha 1 and all kinds of other previous generation Sony Alpha cameras, in particular if they have a full frame sensor. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel, there's always more to come. Thanks for watching, stay safe and healthy, and of course, peace out.